So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Sorry, we're getting a little bit of a late start. We had some technical difficulty, and it's so interesting. I want to share this story because oftentimes when we are trying to do something important, it could be a halaqah, it could be even like trying to finish editing an article or doing something that's important, we often have what now we call double attacks. And it's like it doesn't happen at any other time. And it could be something as crazy as, like, this has happened before, like with this camera. Once the professor was giving a really important khutbah, and I could not for the life of me get it to focus, because it's autofocus, and it's like a brand new camera. So if you go back onto our YouTube site, you'll see there's like one recording that says, sorry for the lack of focus. And someone actually chewed me out, saying, well, the least you could do is buy like a second camera in case this happens. And so I thought, oh my God, should I actually do that? But the next time it happened, it actually was doing that same thing where it was not focusing. I took it and I gave it to the professor and pray on this. And he did it, and it actually started working. Okay, so I take it as a good sign that we had technical difficulty today. I hope that means that we're going to do important things and talk about important things today. And actually, it's really good for me too. I have to apologize in advance because I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm a little bit I apologize because usually, when I am sleep deprived, I have no filter. And whatever filter I do have normally is already very thin and often doesn't work. So if I say anything that's inappropriate or that's a little bit too heated or emotional, then you'll understand why. And I have my notes too because I'm worried that I'm going to go, oh my God, I forgot exactly what I'm going to say. But anyway, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and welcome, and I hope that everyone had a wonderful Eid, and we had a really nice Eid. We actually spent, I think if you follow what we do, we have a lot of recordings online, so we were actually at a number of protests. The professor was speaking outside the Saudi consulate in support of the Saudi scholars who have been tortured and imprisoned, and some have now received death sentences. And so actually what I wanted to announce, which is actually very exciting, is that next week we're going to have an event where the professor will be in conversation with the son of Salman al-Oda, who is one of the scholars, very prominent Saudi scholars who has 20 million followers online and stuff. But anyway, his son is going to come, Abdullah, and join us, and they're going to have a conversation about just what's happening. So we're excited about that. And of course, we wish we could meet on a better occasion, but I think it's really important that we have the opportunity to talk about what's happening, because I think people have been very quiet about the events out there. We also
should bring people so we can film them.
Yes, so we've invited a number of Muslim organizations and people and stuff like that. But if anybody's in the Los Angeles area and wants to join us, then please email me so we can definitely increase the invitation for that. And then the next day we actually went to a protest for what's happening in Syria in Idlib, and we were outside the CNN building in Hollywood, and again the professor spoke about that issue as well, so you can find all of that stuff online. And then we had a number of really wonderful spiritual events. So the professor spoke at Laylatul Qadr at the Islamic Center, and then right afterwards we drove to a midnight spiritual night at the Islamic Center of Southern California, where he gave what I thought was an amazing, one of his best talks on spiritual elevation, where it was personal and it was poignant and it was very inspiring. So I really encourage you to watch that. And we had a number of very fiery khutbahs. So, but the thing that was also very special that we did this Ramadan, which I've actually never really done before, is a group dhikr session where we came here and we got together, and I've been 25 years a Muslim, and the first time I actually did a dhikr session was last year. We did it as part of our family. We would just kind of do it, just Sharif and Sharif and the professor and I. And this year was the first time that we actually brought other people. And the funny story is I discovered that the professor sort of said to me, well, I've never really wanted to do a dhikr session because I know that you would ask way too many questions. It would be a huge headache. So, because I tend to ask a gazillion questions about all kinds of things, and so early on in our marriage, I actually got a question quota. So we reached the age where I could ask too many questions. Because for us, you can imagine, when you're in the company of somebody who is just so learned and so wonderful, it's like you just want to ask every question that your heart has. But if you, are seeing from the professor's perspective, it's like everyone you encounter wants to ask you a question. And it gets very exhausting, and your energy is limited, and from being here that there's no such thing as sort of a quick answer to a question, right? You ask a question, you get the history, the context, the background, the nuance, the different opinions, and then finally that. So, every question takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So I kind of say this as sort of like a, please be aware that when you do ask questions, because I learned this the hard way, when you are ready to ask a question of the professor, take the time to think it out, because and do your homework and ask something that is important. Because I always worry that maybe God has said, you have, professor, a quota of questions that you will answer before you leave this planet, and so I want to make sure that every single question he answers is actually something that I can capture, in recording and uploading, so others can benefit too. So anyway, just a side note. But the dhikr session was really amazing and beautiful, and so I think he agreed to do it because it's like, okay, I'll do the introductory explanation and kind of take everyone through whatever questions I might have. So it's like, it's like a shared group. So anyway, but dhikr, for people who don't know what dhikr is, because I didn't actually know exactly what it was, it's when a group of people come together and they recite and repeat beautiful prayers in hopes of like capturing the attention of God for amplified blessings. And so the thing that I thought was really beautiful is, or that I learned that was very beautiful, is that there is a power in reciting those words in Arabic, and that when you get a group of people together, that you really amplify that power. So it's, even if you don't know what the Arabic means, and just by association of being in this group, that you get kind of blessings by association. And on top of that, when you have someone like the professor who's leading the dhikr, someone at that high station with God, you get those extra blessings just by being there too. So that's a lesson in, if you're going to do dhikr, make sure you have someone who's at a high station with God, so you kind of get those extra blessings. But it was actually, so it was really a beautiful and a new experience for me. And like so many things, like new experiences kind of come with a lot of joy and elation, but also a little bit of anxiety and nervousness, because it was like, a new thing. And, it was interesting because it made me kind of think back to my early days as, a convert, when everything was sort of new and you're kind of learning everything, and you're a little bit anxious and a little bit, worried about doing things. And, it made me kind of rethink sort of my relationship with things like the Arabic language and the things that I learned as a convert. And it also sparked in me kind of a reevaluation of like a lot of the messages that or the understandings or perhaps misunderstandings that that I learned from the Muslim community early in my days as a convert. So these are things that, upon reflection, I was like, I really want to kind of rethink about my experience and my journey. Because, the professor, especially recently, has been talking a lot about all the things happening in the world. Muslims are in a bad place. The constant question is, okay, what can I do to make a difference? Like, what is my particular role in, trying to affect change? And so even things like, when I was a convert, of course you have to learn Arabic so you understand, how to do your prayers. And, converts often ask, like, well, do I need to do my prayers in Arabic, or can I do them in English? And then you also learn things like, well, it's really good to learn Arabic if you can. You should try to memorize as many surahs as you can. You should try to learn these sorts of things. And what's interesting is, like, thinking back on that, some of like the messaging that was given to me was kind of like, okay, as a matter of piety and as a matter of being a good Muslim, these are the sort of the things that you have to do. So one of them was sort of like Arabic. And, in that pool of things too are like, as a woman, of course, well, you have to wear hijab. So it's kind of like, if you don't wear hijab, you're not as good of a Muslim. And that, I've talked about my experience or my thinking about hijab and other halaqas, so I don't really want to, open that can of worms. But just to say that, as an example, I think one of the biggest disservices that the Muslim community has done for Muslims, Muslim women in particular, and converts in particular, is, this idea that piety is connected to whether or not you wear hijab. So that's, one of those things that I would question. And the other thing, like in that kind of pool of things that I was thinking about, like in my early days as a convert, is, just sort of like the appearance of, like, when you become a Muslim, what are the things that you should adopt to become a better Muslim? And, one of them is kind of like, for men, like, what do you wear? Like or I mean, actually not even just men, but men and women. Like the idea of, okay, you're a convert who grew up in America, you have no association to anything really Arab, Pakistani, Indonesian, whatever. And all of a sudden you convert and you're wearing, Arab clothing, or you're wearing Pakistani clothing. And, part of the reason why I bring these things up is like when you're a convert, I think that you are, very eager to, understand like, okay, how do I be a good Muslim? How do I make sure that I do everything right? And you know so little that you really don't have a whole lot of discernment. But, these, I always kind of like was struck with this feeling of, the same feeling I had when I entered the dhikr, which is kind of like, I feel like I'm late to the party. Like, converts sort of feel like they show up, they're late to the party because everyone else has been there, everyone knows what's going on, and you're kind of clueless, and you're like, okay, maybe I should know how to do this. And maybe and I don't really know how to do this. So I think that's probably, like the dhikr kind of made me feel like, okay, I was not familiar with like the things that I'm supposed to be doing. So let me take a step back and say, so what we were doing at the dhikr, you start out, and you can actually see the recording online. We started out by reciting things that were familiar to me. So things like Al-Fatiha, so I know Al-Fatiha, and I can say that no problem. Then Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, and Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq. And so as we're doing this as a group, it's like, okay, I'm in my zone. I feel powerful, I know what I'm doing, this is great. And then we moved into sort of the things that I didn't know. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I don't know Arabic, and I haven't really spent a lot of time learning, some of these other, like, dua or other things. And it, like, kind of triggered this idea of, oh my God, I'm late to the party. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if this is, like, if I've done something wrong by not spending more time doing this. And that was sort of a humbling experience. So, again, so this opened up this whole idea of, okay, so what is it that's really, important for us to know as Muslims, and especially as we are moving forward. So, as a convert, you in the early days, you become very susceptible to what people tell you should do. And then on top of that, that idea of I want to do what's right, those things sort of make you, very anxious to kind of, adopt everything and not really know, like, what is going to make a difference and what's not going to make a difference. I like the fact that, like, what I really admire people who have taken the time to learn Arabic. So, like, definitely the first message you get is you should try to do everything you can to learn Arabic. But despite, like, in my case, I never, unfortunately, learned Arabic. And despite, all intentions and, I just couldn't pull it together. I didn't have the wherewithal to make it happen. But I really admire, those people who take the time and really do the hard work and learn the language. And so, for that, I feel like, envious at times. But the thing that I notice that oftentimes converts do, like when they haven't taken the time to really learn and master the language, is they start using Arabic in sort of like Arabic word dropping way. So like they'll, instead of saying like this is good for my faith, they'll say this is good for my deen, or they'll say, oh, this is good for your iman, or they might say, oh, in the dunya, instead of saying, well, in this world, or in the akhirah, in the hereafter. And it's one of these sort of like irritating kind of things that people do, because especially as a non-Arabic speaker, I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I don't think you get brownie points just for throwing in Arabic words here and there. And, and for me, like as an English-speaking person, it's like really important to me that I understand like what the Arabic is. So if people have sort of been following like the professor and like his, the way he talks and stuff, they may have noticed that I kind of insist on, please, if you are saying, are you going to say anything in Arabic, make sure that you translate. And I think, I'm really grateful that it's now sort of second nature now, that you'll notice that when he says something in Arabic, whether it's in a khutbah or a lecture, he really makes the point of, saying it in English. And so, so when I go back and I go, okay, I recognize now that, as much as I might have wanted to learn Arabic in the past, that I think I'm going to probably leave this planet not ever having mastered Arabic. So what actually does that mean for me as, a pious Muslim? And what does that mean, like, that feeling in Dhikr of, oh my God, I don't know this Arabic, I don't know this, I don't know that. And then it's like, does that make me a lesser person? Does that make me a lesser Muslim? And it made me kind of step back and go, well, wait a minute, I don't think, obviously we know Islam is a message for humanity, and I don't think that God expected that, all the Muslims in the world, had to be proficient at learning a foreign language in order to benefit from the message to humanity. So, and I don't think that people should be made to feel lesser, like converts often do, if you don't learn Arabic. And so, again, it's so those kinds of things, so I started thinking, okay, so what is my place? What is my purpose? How do I add value in making a difference? Like back to this theme, how do I make a difference? So one is, I want to make sure, like the professor translates everything into English, but I also want to make sure that converts don't feel like they are lesser if they somehow, don't know Arabic. And third is that, to tell Muslims, please stop doing this Arabic word dropping, or name dropping. And, it's interesting because I don't think people, like converts, people don't realize like the messages that converts get, because when you're so like open to everything and you don't really know anything and you assume that, all born Muslims came to the party before you, so you're the latecomer and so you just kind of defer to them, that a lot of this can be very damaging. And like looking back now and looking at where we are as Muslims, you cannot help but feel that we have been kind of our own worst enemy. So when we like contribute to this notion of Islam being a very foreign religion, so for example, as converts, if you're wearing like Arabic, or Pakistani clothing, you go to your Eid prayers. Like I was always struck when we lived in Texas, we would go to Eid prayers, and like literally, you walk in and you just see like white people, and they're not, and I'm sorry, I don't mean this in a racist way, but it's kind of like converts and non-converts. It's just like this flurry of Arab clothing, and you go to any Islamic center and you see what they're selling in the stores, and it's like this, this underlying message that if you want to be Muslim, you have to look Arab or you have to look Pakistani. And I think that these are the types of things that we need to be smart about and think about, because our enemies are spending millions upon millions of dollars in the Islamophobic industry to convince non-Muslims that this is a foreign religion, that these people are not like us, they look different, we don't really understand their culture is not compatible with ours, and and that makes it very easy for them to dehumanize us as a people, and then target us, kill us, torture us, and you see that happening all around the world. And to build on some of the themes that the professor has talked about, it's like when we live in a place like America or in the West, anywhere, and we have the freedom to choose what we look like, how we sound, how we present ourselves as Muslims. It's a big responsibility. We really need to think about what we're conveying. When I was, just to tell you a story, when my first job out of college, I was a commercial real estate broker. So I was hired along with a bunch of sort of like young kids, fresh out of college, green around the ears, didn't know anything, but they were ready to train to be salespeople. And how do you be an effective salesperson? I remember the very first thing that one of our bosses told us is, you have to understand that perception is reality. That whatever people perceive, that's the reality because that's what they see and that's what they believe. It doesn't matter that you're not as you appear to be. So this was really powerful because you think, for Muslims, if perception is reality, then what is the perception of Muslims? And oftentimes, and that's really problematic. So when we think about how do we make a difference, there are a couple of things that I would suggest. As far as, things like hijab, I understand that people get very testy about, you're taking away my right to express my religious identity. Well, first of all, I would argue that, I don't believe that the hijab is a universal, religious identity for women. Because, I understand, it's a call for modesty, and modesty is contextual. And, and it's like I understand, you want to wear your scarf, you want to wear your burqa on the beach, but people are dying. And when people use that scarf as a means for, making you an other or a foreign entity, or basically take it to their advantage to kill people and target people, we have to think about priorities. Okay, sure, it would be nice to wear a scarf, but you know, if it's used against us, maybe we should think about, you know, is this something that God actually really wanted for us to do? And how important is it when people are dying? You know, or when you wear your abaya and you wear your cap and you don't really have an association with it, but you like it. Again, it's very foreign. And we do have to care about how people perceive us, especially here, you know, in America when, you know, white nationalism is on the rise. And when we use language like, you know, the Arabic words that we throw here and there, again, it becomes very exclusionary for people who don't speak Arabic. And it almost makes you feel like, you know, even when you say like, salam, brother, salam, sister, people who don't know what salam means, you know, it could be kind of like a code word for, you know, the Muslim, you know, whatever. You could very easily just say peace, you know, hey, love you, whatever. It's not, you know, it's not that important that we follow something like that. To give you an example, and this was, I thought, very interesting piece of learning. People, and some of the people here may know this better than me, but the history of white nationalists in this country. You know, at one time they were really big on the, you know, KKK, the white robes, the hoods, the redneck look. You know, they had a particular perception about them or look about them. And somewhere along the line, someone was very smart and said, listen, let's think strategically about this. This is a turnoff. People are not responding well to white robes and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So from now on, we are going to adopt a very clean-cut look. And, you know, get rid of your tattoos, get rid of your weird haircuts, make yourself look normal, wear suits, look really nice. And now you can infiltrate the military, you can infiltrate the police, you can infiltrate the government, and they have. And look at where they are. And it's, you know, so it's food for thought. You know, like how important is it that we hold on to these like symbols of quote unquote Islamicity that I'm not even sure, you know, how it's defined. And what does it mean here in America? Like imagine if all of us were, you know, when every time we go to the mosque, we look, you know, very presentable. And I know people are going to say, well, you know, you're like selling out for the West. No, I think this is an issue of, you know, being in a situation where we have to think smart about how we're being persecuted and what tools are being used against us. So, just a thought. Did you want to say something?
We're Westerners.
We're Westerners.
I'm a Westerner.
Exactly.
What am I supposed
I mean,
to be?
that's exactly the point. You know, like I have no connection to a scarf. I have no connection to anything other than what I grew up with. But the very strong message, and I'm sure you got this too, Anthony,
Oh, yeah.
is that, you know, once you become a Muslim, you have to start adopting all of these sort of symbols of Islamicity. And I'm pushing back and I'm saying no. And because the cost now is simply too high. And the last thing is, you know, what's really interesting is, as a convert, you know, when you're learning about the religion, if you have the good benefit of like finding books that were written like in the early 19th century or before the onset of Wahhabism, you actually find decent books. So like the very first book that was very influential to me was called The Religion of Islam by an Ahmadi. His name was Maulana Muhammad Ali. And, you know, like he was, I think he was trained in Britain, you know, and so the book was beautiful. And it was written in English and it was very, you know, like interesting and smart and all of that. But fast forward, I mean, if I had been, you know, like, when I look at like what I see at the bookstores, you know, Islamic bookstores, and the pamphlets, and the language, and even the quality of all of that, and the language, the phraseology that people use to describe Islam, you know, it's almost as if, like, I get the distinct impression that we had a non-native speaker that came over and translated the Arabic, and used words that by now, are like not even in use anymore. But we, as like Native American speakers, adopted that and spread it. So things like, for example, okay, I don't even know how to say this word, viceregent, viceregent, you know?
Viceregent.
How do you say it? Okay.
Viceregent.
But something like what? It's a keeper, you know, of earth, right? Yeah. I mean,
someone who acts in the stead of somebody else.
Okay. So, you know, or even like, so why do we use that word? You know, we could use a descriptor. We are the gentle caretakers of, you know, the land of, you know, the creation of the divine being, you know, of God. I mean, you know, we use enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. Who enjoins anything? Does anyone know what enjoin means, right? I mean, you could say, like, you know, we encourage people, or I wrote something very eloquent when I had a little bit more sleep, so, We are cutting-edge masters of social justice and a faith dedicated to serving the most disempowered in our society. We call people to their conscience to perform acts of beauty, kindness, and grace, and we call people to resist the temptation of pursuing a path of darkness or evil. How does that sound as opposed to enjoying the good and forbidding evil? It's the same meaning, but it's like, we have not done a very good job of using the tools of our language to really convey the sophistication and the beauty of what we represent. So, what I'm calling for is just sort of like a rethinking of like, how do we present who we are and what we stand for? Like, I get really frustrated when people are like, oh, Christianity is, the faith of love. No, Islam is the faith of love, but we haven't actually conveyed that in our language. And language is an art, and language is power. And we have incredible writers, we have incredible artists, we have incredible people who, have all kinds of talents, and we don't use that. If you're a convert, for some reason, it's like the logical path is, okay, you start learning Arabic, you go overseas to, wherever, now you can go to Morocco or Jordan, you start learning texts because you're on a path to learn fiqh. So is every convert supposed to be like an expert in fiqh? No. I mean, it's like, it's like, it just doesn't make sense. So, ironic because here, we do this tafsir and we mine the meanings, right? So we go and we say, okay, here's sort of the flat line translation, then let's go to the next level and let's look at what these words could mean. And if it means this, then this is the nuance and the depth of meaning, and let's go to a third layer. And if it could mean this, then it could mean this whole number of things. And we go, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Well, what we need to do now is we need to reverse engineer that process. And we have to go, okay, what is the beauty of our message? And how do we then convey that in the best language, in the best, commercials, in the best, media, or whatever, use the tools that we have before us. Where people before might say, well, I wear my shirt, and I can hear my son going, hey, dude, I rock my t-shirt. It's like we have to use the language of our age and the language of, our culture, and not be afraid to do that. I mean, in the last story, which is kind of like, shortly after 9/11, the professor and I actually traveled here to Los Angeles, and we met with a bunch of Muslim leaders, and I'm not going to say who they are because people will know who they are. But I remember it was kind of like one of these strategy meetings, like, okay, what do we do? And this was like one of those, I don't know if people were old enough or around or whatever, but after 9/11, there was like this window of opportunity. There was like a gap of maybe a year, maybe 6 months, where the world was like, oh my God, the Twin Towers fell. Who are Muslims? We don't know anything about this religion. Who are they and why would they, what in their religion would allow this to happen? And people were listening with an open heart. And come on in. People were listening with an open heart and an open mind, and they genuinely wanted to understand, like, what is Islam and what is this about? But, what ended up happening is that window of opportunity closed, and the Islamophobes came in, and they saw the opportunity, they smelled blood, and then the rest of the story, the millions upon millions of investment in, the Islam is evil message. But back then, right after 9/11, when we were meeting with the Muslim leadership, I was working in a marketing company, and I came in and I said, listen, what we really need to do is, because they were spending money on things like, brochures and pamphlets and, like position papers and things like that. I'm like, no, we need to hire a PR firm. We need to have someone professionally manage the image of Muslims. And we need to think about things like commercials. We need to think about, messaging, billboards on buses or whatever, whatever tools we have before us. We need to use those things in a smart way. And they, they balked at the idea. They thought it was stupid. They thought, they didn't pursue it. And I always wonder, so this was back in the early 2000s, and here we are 2019, and how bad things have gotten. What if we had had a PR firm back then? What if we had done something about it back then? Where would we be today? But anyway, so, but it's never too late, inshallah. We have to start doing it because we understand that the walls are closing in. So to sum up, again, perception is reality. So we really need to think about countering that perception of foreignness, and and making sure that we use these tools to our benefit. Using Arabic or not using Arabic as a tool of exclusion, or as proof of piety. Unless you've actually mastered the language and you're fluent in it, then by all means, you're amazing and you should do that. But if you don't know Arabic, don't drop Arabic words as if that gets you anything. And lastly, reclaiming, reappropriating the language we use to talk about our faith, and using that power of language and power of presentation and communication. These are the things that, to me, on reflecting on all of these sorts of experiences that I had over Ramadan, these are the things that we can do to make a difference. So, you can check yourself. Do I do these things? Do I drop Arabic words? Do I wear things that, present me in a foreign way? Do I talk about Islam in a way that is interesting and compelling and that doesn't fall back to the typical phraseology that is used out there? And check your friends and, and do something to make a difference. And I think everyone has their own, skill set and tools and whatever, but I think every little bit makes a difference. So that's it. Thank you.